to ask questions and be there with us. Cool. So before I started off, I want to just say a few words from my side. This marks such a big moment for me and in my career, and like for our entire team of coming here together, and for you guys as well. I think we're really a part of making history today. This is a first step and an experiment towards a much more open R&D process that can re-engineer our broken therapeutic research system. In that sense, Catalyst is a breakthrough in open funding and value distribution that can re-empower patients, scientists, and the public around how we research and fund new medicines. Therapeutics development, I think, has been trapped in a vicious cycle that in many ways has resulted in an innovation crisis that harms patients today, creates a lot of intransparency in the industry, and also a loss of trust. And today really marks a milestone to change that and to create new hope within the system. So for us, the launch of Catalyst really marks a worldwide first, also from a technical perspective. As many of you know, over the past year, our team has really been engineering at these really complex intersections between distributed networks, cryptocurrency, and biotech and pharma research. And so our goal with this application is really to create a first bridge between the public and scientists, and create a new bridge of trust between these two massive stakeholders that have kind of been forgotten in this long process of pharma development. So with this today, we want to open up this arduous funding process of like how early stage research is discovered, the incentives around early stage research, and really create a new incentive-driven crowdfunding mechanism that in the long run can redistribute the value in the form of intellectual property, and also promote open science and open data. I think pharma and biotech are some of the most closed up industries. And also for us, Catalyst really marks the first step to opening up that research process. I think it also marks a huge step for the token engineering community. And thank you. I want to take a big moment here to thank all of you guys. I think today we're really standing on the shoulders of giants. There's been so much thought leadership going into this application that came together from this community. And all of that thought development is really driven by open source. And this is also what we want to bring back into this pharma and biotech space, is really to make that more open source. And in that sense, bonding curves are a really new and exciting design parameter. And our product lead, Tizian, is going to go deep into like the ins and out of that and what will actually happen once you interact with our application. Yeah. So with this, our goal is to reconnect scientists with their backers, remove the middlemen, and put you guys in the center, really creating direct, uninterrupted bridges. I also want to say a massive thank you again to our entire team at Molecule for bringing us to this point. Thousands of hours of engineering went into this, many hours of design, of architecting, and then also of engaging the public, engaging scientists to really subscribe to this crazy idea of using a new mechanism like this to fund their research. It took a lot of trust building, and we're really excited that we're here today. Over the coming month, we also have many more exciting research projects launching on Catalyst. So this really marks a first step. And I'm really excited to invite you all to be here with us today, to be part of making history and contributing to this first breakthrough study. Cool. Having said that, I want to hand it over to Tizian, and we can dive right into how this is actually going to work. Tizian?
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro, Paul. Hi, everyone. Before we dive into more details about the actual research we're trying to fund through our initiatives, I want to give a quick outline of how the system actually works. Maybe a bit in contrary to how Paul announced it, I want to try to stay a bit on a higher level and kind of avoid getting lost in some complicated bonding curve discussions. But please feel free to ask about some more details or things you're not sure about during the Q&A session later in the call. So yeah, with that, let's jump into this. We describe Molecule Catalyst as like a decentralized platform that allows researchers to create public fundraising campaigns for their projects. Research proposals are submitted to the Molecule team, and everything is peer reviewed by us and our scientific advisory board for things like feasibility, also relevance, what kind of fields of research we think are relevant at the moment, and definitely credibility on the researcher side. And if successful, these campaigns will be launched on the Catalyst platform. Everyone can browse through our application and review all the details in a very transparent way around can review all the details around the research project. If we manage to convince you that this project is a great cause and can have real impact, and the team and the outlined milestones make sense to you, you can contribute to these fundraising campaigns using the DAI stablecoin. In return for your contribution, you will receive unique project tokens as a reward. This is exactly where the famed token bonding curves come into play. You can actually increase the value of these tokens by bringing in more people that want to support the researchers and kind of be rewarded by doing so. Then lastly, researchers and like their affiliates will share regular progress updates and results with their contributor base, and kind of create a new knowledge base around their research areas on our platform. So everything, like all the progress and everything that's happening, will be shared in a very transparent way. Our main reason for really creating Molecule Catalyst was to provide an improved way for researchers in early research stages to raise funding from the public and be able to continue with their important work. Compared to more like conventional providers, I think our platform is very different, and generally our approach is very different. But we believe that we have introduced a couple of features that will actually be able to create kind of a better fundraising experience for scientists. So I quickly wanted to outline like the major design considerations we made, and how we are trying to achieve that improved way of fundraising. First, by using blockchain technology in general, we think that we can create a more accessible, efficient, and transparent way of kind of fundraising or crowdfunding. By relying on DAI, we kind of can make these campaigns globally accessible without any jurisdictional constraints. On the other side, like all the funds that are going through our platform are managed by smart contracts on the Ethereum network, which will reduce payment fees and also heavily increases transparency. So like all the funds are directly forwarded to researchers or to wallets controlled by researchers, and nothing is going through our accounts. So we will not be able to interfere with these funding streams. And everything is basically auditable all the transactions are auditable on the Ethereum net. Also, I just want to mention here that like security for us is super important, and all of our smart contracts are currently under final review by QuantStamp, and we expect to receive like final certification within the next few days. So it was really important for us to keep all these funds safe and make sure that whatever is accumulated really benefits those research groups. Then the second major topic we try to wrap our heads around is the introduction of like a tokenized reward system around these token bonding curves. As probably many of you know, this is one of like the first real world application that will use token bonding. That by experimenting with different parameters in kind of the real world and facilitate real value transfer, we can improve our understanding and build better models and kind of improve iteratively over time for our next project phases. In this context, we believe that by using these rewards or this reward system, we can kind of incentivize promotion of fundraising campaigns on the contributor side and relieve pressure from the researcher side to actually like market these things and gain traction. Secondly, we think that by introducing token bonding curves, we can create much faster feedback loops between researchers and contributors and kind of create a new layer of trust between these two parties and ensure on the contributor side that that researchers really use the money for a good cause and also for the cause they advertised for. We plan on releasing different research projects on this platform, and also based on different research areas and causes, we plan on experimenting with different parameters to actually generate data around these token bonding curves and then feed them back into our theoretical models and really improve our understanding on how these incentive designs can create better or more efficient user experiences. With this, like just outlining the high level goals of Molecular Catalyst, I want to hand over to Tyler, our lead scientist, who will guide you through some more details around the first research project that will actually be hosted on our platform.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this call today. It's an extremely exciting moment for us and hopefully for you as well, and also for psychedelics research. I wanted to just start by talking about my own personal interest in psychedelics research and sort of why I think this is probably the most exciting time in history for the space. Stanislav Grof, who was a well-known psychiatrist and psychologist and also an extremely prominent early researcher into the therapeutic uses of psychedelics, said that psychedelics could be for the study of the mind what the microscope was for biology or what the telescope was for astronomy. And I think it's important to contextualize when we think about these sorts of therapeutics, it's important to contextualize the insight that they might be able to give us into things like consciousness and our own minds, and sort of the greater, even metaphysical questions that humans face. I always sort of had a basal interest in psychedelics. And then when I was at the National Institute on Aging, I was working just across from where they were beginning to carry out studies at Johns Hopkins using psilocybin for the cessation of smoking. They were doing trials looking at LSD for the treatment of depression and existential angst in hospice patients. And if anyone's interested, Michael Pollan wrote a really amazing book called How to Change Your Mind that sort of details the history of psychedelic studies. But anyway, it's really apt that this first trial is happening in Canada. Canada has an extremely rich history of psychedelics research. The term psychedelic was actually coined in 1957 in Saskatchewan by Humphrey Osmond, who had moved there and was really a pioneering researcher at the time. In the late 50s and early 60s, there was a tremendous amount of work happening in sort of the therapeutic side of psychedelics. People were beginning to understand the mechanisms. And then there was, I guess, what can be considered a relatively dark period for psychedelics research. After Timothy O'Leary became quite, I guess you could say, loud and really outspoken about trying to leverage psychedelics to make people think differently. Governments eventually sort of criminalized psychedelics, and there was no real research done outside of sort of underground research until, let's say, maybe the past 10 years. With that, I just wanted to say this is really just the beginning of being able to understand psychedelics and being able to utilize them for human health and for human benefits. So this first trial that we're going to be funding is a high impact clinical trial to study the effects of microdosing psilocybin. And it's with Rotem Petranker and Thomas Anderson, who are at the University of Toronto and have just formed this Toronto Center for Psychedelic Science to begin carrying out these trials. It's going to be the world's first clinical trial employing an advanced placebo-controlled design to identify whether microdosing psilocybin provides a similar benefit to those experienced at higher doses. And at present, the Toronto Center for Psychedelic Science has some funds to explore this in a couple of patients, but what they want to do is expand this to 100 patients, which would really allow them to set a world-class precedent in responsible psychedelics research. It would also get to statistically significant and meaningful, reliable estimates of the effects of microdosing in a very broad context. So not to treat depression, not to treat anxiety, but just looking at sort of the fundamental effects, which makes this study extremely interesting. If anyone has a general interest in microdosing, this will be one of the first trials that is actually using laboratory-grade psilocybin in a controlled laboratory environment, as opposed to just collecting self-reported responses from users. So there's an element to control here that will allow us to gain substantial insight into the effects of microdosing. Just going a bit more into the specific details of the trial, if you can go to the next slide. This is the proposed study is an 8-week randomized placebo-controlled double-blinded clinical trial with a crossover washout period. Its primary targets are creativity, mood, and focus. So again, really looking at the effects of microdosing in a sort of fundamental context, with secondary targets being social connection, self-efficacy, and mindfulness. And all participants in this study will attend a baseline assessment before being randomized into 4 weeks of either A, receiving a placebo for a 4-week period, or receiving a weekly microdose of psilocybin. And after 4 weeks, these two groups will essentially cross over. So the group that was receiving the placebo will begin receiving the psilocybin, and the group that was receiving the psilocybin will begin receiving the placebo. And having some participants receive psilocybin before the placebo allows the research group to essentially assess whether the beneficial effects wash out over that subsequent 4-week period. And conversely, the placebo first group will establish sort of a rigorous baseline measurement by which they will be able to evaluate the within participant effects of the psilocybin. And as I mentioned, this is really the first time that they'll be administering pharmaceutical grade psilocybin in a laboratory sort of environment and actually studying this in a controlled way. So it's an extremely historic moment for psychedelics research more generally. And that sort of brings me to my next point. This is going to result in a really rich exploratory analysis that should be able to provide a critical precedent for legal, responsible, and impactful psychedelics research worldwide. And yeah, we couldn't be happier to be helping with funding for this trial. In terms of outcomes, so what you will see produced from this trial, the group has agreed to publish 4 open access papers that will be freely available to the public. They're going to present this data at 4 conferences. They're going to write 4 knowledge mobilization pieces, really to bring the public up to speed on how at least giving them a good understanding, if you are beginning to microdose yourself, what the risks are, what the data sort of says. And so this is something that we could see real results from this year, and sort of have some scientific merit, sort of backing a lot of the claims or potentially rejecting them that people have been making about microdosing for some time now. And there'll be a multi-study follow-up plan using the data that's collected in this phase to support future studies, looking, for example, if psychedelics or psilocybin could be used to, for example, treat depression or anxiety, increase social ability, increase self-efficacy. So there's a series of experiments long-term that should be able to be born out of this trial. Yeah, so I mean, with that, I just wanted to really encourage, if you are a person who is interested in psychedelics research, if you're a person who's been microdosing or has a general interest in microdosing, this is an opportunity for you to involve yourself directly with researchers, create tight feedback loops, have a chance to communicate with them. For people who are contributing to this trial, we're going to organize AMAs with the research group. You'll really have a chance to feel like and be a real part of what I consider to be and what we all consider to be an extremely historic moment, not only for decentralized financing and drug development, but really for psychedelics research as well. Yeah, and with that, I just wanted to thank you all for joining and yeah, encourage you to support if you're able to. Thank you so much.
I mean, I want to add a small little thing of why we're really excited about psilocybin in general. It's because there's multiple companies now that have psilocybin almost in stage 3 clinical trials, which actually makes it very viable that psilocybin will be approved as a regulated treatment in the coming years. And it's by many researchers and scientists has been touted as a breakthrough treatment for depression, for post-traumatic stress disorder. Much better than anything else that is currently on the market. So
yeah, one point on that. I mean, in some of these experiences, what's particularly interesting about it is that if we look at it, all of the sort of drugs that exist for various types of mental illness, there are very few drugs that you can give one dose of and have a sort of, and this is slightly different than microdosing in this context, but there have been experiences in that context that Paul is talking about with depression and anxiety, where people are having one treatment with a psychedelic per month or every 2 to 3 months and having extremely profound responses in terms of the state of their illness. So, I mean, yeah, this is a therapeutic area that will very likely change the way that we treat mental illness and additionally understand human consciousness.
cool. So let's fund it and make it happen.
Awesome. Yeah, from here we quickly wanted to like wrap it up with a symbolic like donation from our side to that campaign that is now live. I quickly wrong button. For that reason, I quickly wanted to take you guys through like the actual process on the app and just show how it's working. Also afterwards, after the call, like this will be opened up to the public and everyone can go and have a look themselves and read through all the research details and yeah, think for themselves if this would be a cause worth contributing to. Does it work with the screen sharing? Can everyone see the application?
Yeah, it looks good, Tizian.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so we just start off on our landing page that kind of lists the different projects that will be available for fundraising. At the moment, we start off with the project Tyler just introduced, our clinical trial around microdosing psilocybin. As said in the beginning, like all the details we really took into considerations are listed on these pages, with many more additional resources, links to scientific publications, some image, some background information, and then obviously all details around funding status and the underlying token bonding curve that manages these fundraising campaigns. So yeah, we would definitely encourage you to have a look at this page yourself, read through the details, and if questions come up or something should be unclear, we are always super happy about feedback we receive from community and potential users. So at the moment, it's generally not necessary to create an account or log in if you just want to have a look at what's currently up there. As soon as you are convinced and think about contributing, you need to identify yourself through MetaMask, and nothing else is provided at the current stage. So you can also contribute to these studies without providing us with a name or any additional details about yourself. Yeah, let's kick it off with a small symbolic donation from our side and hope that the Ethereum network is kind to us.
I mean, you want to say here at this point that essentially the application is live, and with this call, we're essentially making the app live. And I think Griff already went ahead and posted the link.
That should be fine. Yeah, definitely. So we're super excited to open this up to the public, and would love to get as much feedback as we can. See if you guys understand what's happening, if everything makes sense. If you have questions, we are always available through all our channels, be it on Twitter, Telegram. Join us on Discord, and we're happy to help and explain everything in more detail. So let's see. It seems like everything is working fine, and we will be one of the first proud owners of these unique psilocybin microdosing trial tokens.
Maybe something to note here. So, I mean, by the virtue of a bonding curve, the earlier you contribute to the project, the higher your overall stake in the project, which is really where we're excited to kind of launch this with you today. I also just contributed a small amount, and you guys can kind of be, yeah, you guys are like the Genesis funders of this project.
Yeah, good point, Ben.
Awesome.
Yay. Yay. It's been a long road.
Yeah, I heard the link was already posted, but I think within a few minutes, like everything should be publicly available from our landing page, catalyst.molecule.to. Check it out yourself, play around, have a look, and let us know what you think. And I think from here also, at the end, again, huge shout out to the whole team that worked on this over the last few months. Was definitely an exciting journey, many learnings, a lot of frustration as well, but super proud that we can launch on mainnet today. And huge thank you to our team, and obviously the whole community supporting us along the way. And yeah, I would suggest from here we can go into questions, Q&A, remarks, whatever is on your minds.
I think at this stage everyone's probably busy trying to trying to buy.
I just wanted to check if there are any any questions come through the chat while we were presenting, Devin, or
yes, so please just know now that the floor is open for questions. So if you guys do have any questions, you're welcome to drop them through in the chat and we'll read them out. So there's actually one question now coming through from Robert Miller. I'm not sure who of you want to take it, but it's what do the project tokens represent?
Yeah, very good question. So for these or for this initial initiative, the project tokens really only represent your kind of stake in the reward pool. So the only value they have is actually their association with the collateral that is bound in the token bonding curve. For future projects we are exploring moving closer to our vision of actually tying intellectual property rights to these tokens, but at the current stage this is not yet the case.
Yeah, maybe if I can add a few things. So essentially your contribution reflects a donation to the specific research project. However, due to the fact that the tokens also represent a stake in the total collateral pool that is reserved in these bonding curves. And in the way that the campaign works, so something to say as well, now there's a first campaign that is launching now, But if you go onto the, if you look how the campaign is structured, you'll see that there's a second trial coming in and a third trial. So once the first trial is complete, a second stage will kick in. And so your contribution is really a stake in the overall research project. We're going to try and implement future, let's say, utility around this specifically. Something like that corresponds with the research data that comes out of this. So, for example, getting access to like a special AMA with the researcher. But due to the fact that it is a donation project and that everything around it is being open source, the project tokens don't have any other kind of correspondence or rights associated to it other than in the bonding curve.
And I'll just add that, you know, hey, there's some crypto devs in here, right? If and Ethereum is very composable. If you want to add value to these tokens, you can. You can. We could do anything with these tokens, but they represent the people who supported this cause. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of things. I guess I have a quick question. I'm curious about what the next advancements are to your system that you are excited about implementing. So I assume for this first system, you had to stay with a small scope. But are there any features that you really wanted to add but couldn't?
I think one thing that would be, I mean, I don't know how much we can actually speak about this at this point, and I don't want to use this as an opportunity to announce like subsequent projects, but yeah, we have a really amazing project in the works on a handful of longevity therapeutics that are being developed by a tremendous laboratory. I don't want to actually announce the project yet because we'll be having another event for that and doing that publicly. But with that experiment, as Paul mentioned, we're going to be tying. Yeah, in that case, the tokens will actually represent some share in the intellectual property that's generated out of those projects. So it becomes, I think, a lot more. The tokens will have an intrinsic value. And they will actually act as rights to intellectual property. That's more from, so that's sort of a legal innovation as well, and something that I think goes beyond the technology and sort of represents what I believe our trajectory will look like moving forward. So increasingly getting into the ultimate goal for us is to really try to democratize drug development to the point where you could sort of have, I mean, if you wanted to take an extremely long view with it, you could have something like, imagine if like insulin was collectively owned by diabetics, and diabetics were the ones who were funding and owning a therapeutic that was relevant to their disease or something like that. And that's sort of the very long view. But maybe Tizian has something to add from a technology standpoint. I think I sort of addressed that question from a non-technology sort of standpoint and more from a legal standpoint and from an asset standpoint.
Yeah, I think like these legal extensions also come with like obviously like technical considerations. So I think one of the key learnings we want to make here is how these bonding curves behave and what additional features we need to add to make these markets a bit more, I don't know, more stable or more efficient when it actually comes to exchanging like actual legal rights. And this would then definitely go towards exploring more complicated mathematical models, looking at more advanced like vesting rules, and also like maybe introducing other starting points for these campaigns, or like different starting constraints. And then I would say lastly on the other side, like a bit removed from the whole like blockchain or like crypto technology. I think we also want to spend some time on kind of learning about how we can like bootstrap these research and support interaction and create places where discussions can arise and people really start engaging and kind of learn along the way with these researchers what discoveries they are working on. And yeah, I think that's like the second part looking forward.
Something else to just mention, we took part recently in the Ocean Challenge, and we realize that these research projects are going to produce, pretty valuable data, and in future there will be, opportunity to maybe provide that data in an open source fashion and somehow value the data and feed the value back into the markets or to the original token holders who helped originally fund the project. So I think, there's various steps that we can take before we start looking at things like IP being represented on the blockchain and various other more legally complex tasks.
Yeah, and just the huge amount of, what's going to be really interesting about this is just the people interacting with these bonding curves and the sort of dynamics that unfold. And I think, there's really no substitute for deploying these sort of things in a real world context and actually seeing how people really interact with them and what happens. And I think a lot of our learnings in terms of what can be done with the technology and how the technology can be leveraged to create particularly interesting use cases in the context of funding or create really interesting incentives is probably going to be derived from the real world learning experiences we have now and actually seeing people interact with this.
And another comment just to reassure people. So you saw on the project pages that there are milestones that the projects are required to reach, both time and value milestones. And if you contribute to a project that doesn't succeed or meet its milestones, your collateral is redistributed at a later stage, which kind of gives you a bit of a reassurance that the buy that you contribute is actually going towards the cause at hand.
I actually have
a question
from somebody privately. If the psilocybin clinical trial is a success, what are the next steps and what does it mean for people who contribute?
Could you say that one more time, Devin? I couldn't hear you when you were speaking.
If the psilocybin clinical trial is a success, what are the next steps and what does it mean for people who contribute to DAI?
So, if the clinical trial is a success, what we'll be provided with is a lot of data and good science about the utility of microdosing, about the risks of microdosing, about the potential harms of microdosing, the effects on things like creativity, mood, focus, self-efficacy, and that data will be made available to the public, and all of the materials from this study, as well as, and additionally, this study is sort of laying, like I mentioned, sort of creating a legal precedent for psychedelics research moving forward. It will be the basis for conversations with regulators. In terms of what you personally get, yeah, I think a sense of having contributed to something valuable and meaningful in the psychedelic space. But yeah, this first project, because we're really approaching this in an iterative experimental sort of context, and this is really our first experiments with a live project. As Paul mentioned, the tokens don't have any sort of intrinsic value that would when the trial closes, foreseeably I guess, appreciate or have any sort of value other than being sentimental. But that said, people who invest into this or donate to this project early and keep their project tokens, if, as the round fills up and as people invest ahead of you, there is an opportunity to sell those back to the curve, and even potentially make something from that. That's one of the incentives to sort of invest early. Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic.
I want to say something that Griff said earlier as well. Because these tokens are highly composable, there are things that we can engineer around them along the way. But having said that, we also need to be very clear in the essence that you are donating to make the scientific research happen. There might be breakthroughs that come from it. I think the value really that comes from it is for the greater good of how these therapeutics can influence people. And then I think the other really cool element of this is we don't know how the dynamics of these bonding curves are going to play out. And because it's a longer campaign, as I said initially, by contributing to this project now, you also have a large initial stake in that reflects your contribution. So obviously our excitement is that this first that actually this campaign can fill the entire can fill this entire study. And if you go onto the project page again, you'll see that it's structured into different phases.
Yeah, and Chris, that's a correct point. So every project will have its own token. Yeah, exactly. And some of those, for example, in the future might have rights to intellectual property attached to them, or X or Y attached to them. But in this case, this specific token, yeah, is purely representative of your donation.
Cool. So next up, Brendan actually has a question. So Brendan, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you're welcome to ask away. Nope, you're still on mute there. Hold up.
Great. Sorry about that. My understanding is that you're using a DAI for staking purposes and Ethereum for the purposes of the smart contracts. Is that correct? And how should I be thinking about this? Question 2 is the composable tokens is extraordinarily interesting. And I was wondering if maybe GIF or Paul or Tyler could expound upon what you see in the progression of how that could play out. The types of tokens that can be created. And third is at what point is that kind of opened up for anybody to create their own token on top of this, et cetera, et cetera. Am I going overboard?
If you could just go one question at a time, but no, definitely not.
Okay.
Repeat the first question, please.
Sure, I just get so excited. So the first question is, I want to make sure my understanding is correct, that the DAI is used for staking and Ethereum is used for the smart contracts. Is there any other way I should be thinking about this?
No, so that's 100% correct. DAI is actually built on Ethereum as well. So we're just using a very integrated and seamless method of linking them by making our contracts Solidity smart contracts. So it's Ethereum contracts, yeah.
So question number 2 would be maybe GIF or Paul or Tyler could shed some light on this. The idea of composable tokens is extraordinarily interesting. Can you give me a flavor of the types of things you see that can be composed? And we'll leave it at that for now.
I got lots of ideas, but I'll let someone else go first if they have something urgent.
Who's speaking there?
This is Griff.
Hi, Griff. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, Brendan.
I mean, maybe in a more general sense. So one design that we've experimented with a lot is, I don't know if that's what you mean with a composable token, but taking a non-fungible token and as a unique representation of ownership. So you could, for example, take a non-fungible token and attach that to a car, or in our case, a piece of IP, which is a singular unit. And then you kind of make that non-fungible token refungible. So that's for me one element of composability, how we get these tokens to interact with each other. Does that go into the direction of your question, Brendan? Or did you mean more the direction of having a current token and adding more functionality to that token in kind of at later stages?
Actually, all of the above. I'm just trying to get a deeper understanding of, it just, my gut intuition here is that, when you extrapolate out, not just the bonding curves, but the composability, you end up in a very interesting place where you get to engineer whole new orders of functionality that are basically completely unknown. I mean, this is completely open water.
Yeah. I mean, anyone can play with this stuff, right? So this token now exists. And if I want to launch some ICO or something, I can say anyone with these tokens, for every token they have, they can buy that many tokens at half price, right? Or you could have voting where it's like, hey, I want to know the opinions of people who fund psychedelic research. So you guys can vote on, which project should I donate to? I want to hear your guys' thoughts. And then, you can add basically power to this anonymous group of people who only are token holders. But you can also use this as a reason to incentivize more people to get these tokens. For instance, if someone's really wants to be part of that ICO, well, then they can be incentivized to actually buy more tokens. But the people who bought in early had a lot of tokens for fewer dollars. So if there might even be an equilibrium where, oh, well, I want to buy this thing, it actually makes sense for me to donate on the bonding curve up to this point, and then I still get cheaper tokens. You know, there's a lot of interesting things that you can start doing with just the token itself. But what I'm really excited about is when we can start advancing this as an internal economy and using the bonding curve to wrap an external economy around it. So you can start having donations that and this funding of research where when the research gets funded, instead of it being kicked out as DAI, it's actually kicked out as bonding curve tokens. And so any time that money comes into the internal economy, it goes through the bonding curve. But also, anytime donations get spent, it goes through the bonding curve as well. And people have to choose whether or not they want to exit the economy by using the bonding curve and selling tokens, or holding those tokens themselves and hoping that the value of the token goes up. And when you have this internal economy wrapped by a bonding curve, you actually start aligning incentives so that if the people who have these tokens are able to expand the internal economy, expand the economy of researching for doing psychedelic research, then their token value actually goes up. And so now people are incentivized to contribute to a public good. But if instead, when people start coming in, if the internal economy shrinks, then the public, then they actually lose money. Now, you might think, oh, but that's bad. We don't want people to lose money. But you got to remember, we're in the donation space here, right? People who donate always lose money. What's interesting here is that if you that you have skin in the game, that you have opportunity, that you have an incentive, an economic incentive to continue pushing for a larger internal economy, a larger donation space. So
right, because that is in most donation schemes, all of that meta intangibleness is just lost, right? It's not captured.
Yeah. And even worse, the decision makers have no incentives to make good decisions. Bureaucrats and governments that are funding public goods right now, they make a good decision and they fund the public good really well. Great. No one cares.
That's the other sort of interesting part of this for me as well, is the accountability that it sort of creates between the people who are direct. I mean, in the United States, for example, everyone is directly or indirectly funding public research that they are disconnected from through taxes. They don't have any sense of where their money is going, and they don't really have any sort of say in terms of what's happening with that money. If we could engineer a system to have the people who care about specific things using that money to support those projects and feeling that impact and having direct interaction with researchers who are making these sort of things their life's work, that is a system that would be more accountable, more transparent, and probably a lot more fair in the long term. I think creating that link is what's extremely interesting here, and removing all the ambiguity that exists around the process. But again, this is just the first project, and I think we'll be able to see in the future as we begin to roll this out and as we begin to explore more, all of the interesting utility that we can add and the different sort of scenarios that we can engineer around this. So it's a super exciting time. This is infancy. It's day one. We were just born. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. I want to add here as well is that owning a token in this project gives you a choice, because you can also decide to kind of withdraw your stake and sell back to the bonding curve, which sends a signal to the market. And so now you have this much more direct interaction and incentive design between the researcher and the community that he's building and engaging. Because let's say, for example, if I'm as a researcher, if I'm not posting my results, if I'm not engaging, if I'm being intransparent kind of more, then the public and the donators can respond to that accordingly. And I think, as Griff said earlier, there's a whole suite of interactions, specifically around governance and feedback loops that can be built around that over the long run. But yeah, as Tyler said, it's day one. This is the genesis curve, so to speak. And with that, we also wanted to specifically choose a project that was exciting, that was engaging, but also something that wasn't overly complex. Which I think this, yeah.
And I just want to mention one other thing. It's something that we could have foreseeable results from this year in a relatively short timeline. So if you contribute to this project, it is beginning in March. Like, the clinical trial will begin actually occurring. People will be enrolled. We will be able to see results from this trial, and you will be able to actually get something in a relatively short time span in terms of results. So that's incredibly exciting because I'm sure, as many of you know, clinical trials and scientific studies are not always running on those sort of timescales. So this is something with real human beings testing something extremely interesting on a sort of palpable timeline where we can see a result, which is super exciting.
There's a question.
I have a third question too. I don't remember what it was though.
That's okay. There's a question that just came in from Angela. Apart from the mechanism design, can you imagine to also create funding applications and vice versa? Onboarding, for example, patient initiatives around the world who are looking for research in a field they really care about.
I mean, that's a great idea. And that's, I mean, so one of the things that we hope is that as this system organically grows and sort of shows proof of concept, so basically as a community, if we show that we can mobilize funding around a specific cause in a specific area, that will organically begin to attract, let's say, research projects, for example, and people who have interesting things that they want to get funded. But I haven't actually spent any time at all thinking about the reverse of that, like you've just said. And I think that's actually an incredibly interesting way to look at it. So mobilizing patient initiatives, NGOs, et cetera, and people who, yeah, maybe are looking for something to try and attract the researchers in that direction. That's really non-conventional in a way, and it's also quite interesting. And I think it's something that we could definitely look into and explore. And it's also why I would encourage anyone who is thinking about this type of stuff to try to engage with us more often. We really want to, yeah, exactly, bottom up. I think this is so cool that we could build these sort of communities around this. And I mean, and you guys can be as much of a part of the future of this as we are. We really hope that this is a community initiative that grows legs and that people can have some influence on, and that at some point it grows beyond all of us, into something that can't be stopped and really changes the future of drug development and of research. But awesome idea, Angela. Really, really cool. Yeah, I will definitely have a serious think on that, actually.
I just
it's almost like sorry.
No, Jeff, it's because you go first.
It's almost like a citizen subsidy for to put together a pool of funds, like a bounty, and then you say, like, almost like an X Prize, you know? Hey, if there's $1 million in a bounty, who wants to research this, this study or yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we should really look into that. I mean, maybe this is slightly unrelated from Catalyst, but that is one of the ways that we're thinking about growing out molecule more generally. So when it comes to funding, let's say, very expensive, very large scale research projects or therapeutics development. So if you wanted to try to develop a drug that was going to cost, let's say, between $30 and $50 million, taking that sort of approach where you have the funding beforehand and people who are interested in investing in that makes a lot of sense. But I think it could also work in this case as well.
I also just want to say, as a quick point here, guys, thank you so much for contributing already. We're just short of, or like, we basically hit the 2,000 DAI mark already. So we've raised 2,000 DAI. Woohoo!
Wow, okay, amazing. Yay.
Which is super cool. Also, so I just checked the contract, even in the short term, some people decided to sell already. So there's a live interaction. So maybe some of you were like, "What? There's no direct intrinsic value. Like sell. No, so this is cool. And I mean, this kind of showcases the dynamics of the system. So whoever did sell, thank you, because you're making a contribution in that sense, which is super cool.
Learnings.
Yeah, Devin, I want to hand it over to you.
Perfect. I just wanted to kind of say that we've kind of reached our 1 hour mark now, and that is kind of time to bargain for this call. Again, a huge thank you for all of you for coming through and being a part of this. It's amazing to see the support that we've already had with all of you coming through, and the fact that we're almost at 2,000 DAI already. That's amazing. I would like to encourage you to keep donating and keep spreading the word and tweeting about us. Our Twitter handles are, you can drop our Twitter handles in the chat now as well. And I've also dropped a link to our Telegram channel. So if you guys have any further questions that you would like to ask the team, you're more than welcome to join the channel and ask our team directly there, because we're all on there and we respond reasonably fast. And then in addition to this, I'd also like to announce that next week or the week after, we are going to be having a AMA with the researchers that are actually conducting the study. So you'll be able to dive a little bit deeper into the actual study if you have questions about how, for example, the psilocybin is administered, how the clinical trials patients are chosen. So there's a couple of, like, we're going to open that floor and you guys are welcome to tweet questions at us, and we're going to open that up. And there'll be a couple of other events throughout the next few weeks as well, just to keep you guys a little bit more engaged with our content, what's happening. But yeah, I think that's everything from our side. And again, yeah, a huge thank you to everyone. Like, this is really exciting.
Thank you guys so much for the support. It means a huge amount to us. It really, it helps validate all the work that we've been trying to do for a long time. And it's you guys are what makes it possible. So thanks so much.
And
Great,
yeah,
thank you.
I'd like to close this off. So look forward to chatting with you guys in the future and keeping you updated about all of our progress.
Yeah, if you have any feedback about user experience while using the app, or any issues or questions, please send them through.
Please do that as well, yes.
Yeah. I mean, also, yeah, if you have any suggestions around the mechanism design, around, as Griff mentioned, how we can evolve this, if you have any projects that you'd like to see on here, if you want to get in touch with the researcher directly, if you want to, I saw someone is in Toronto and they might be interested to contribute in the study. Yeah, please let us know. All of our channels are open.
Yeah, if there is actually someone who is in Toronto that has an interest in participating, please do let me know, and I can also put you in touch with Rodham and Thomas, who will be recruiting for the trial.
Someone's backing up their truck.
All right, well, that's it.
Okay, guys.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a million.
Next time.
I will say, Ben, the user experience was top notch. Really easy, really good flow. You know, I just sold a little bit just to do it, you know. And I like how you're describing places. No, I did it after he said that.
I knew it was you, Griff. I knew
it. I did it after he mentioned it. I was like, oh shit.
Did you see the little loading icon? That's my favorite.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's super sexy. Yeah.
It is, and it was. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, really good. I'm sorry for posting the link early too. I didn't know that was.
It's okay. The demo gods were already happy, so it's all good.
I'm worried that it would.
Hello.
It was okay. The dev team's
Hello.
got.
Okay. See you guys.
Bye, Griff. Thanks for joining.
Блин, я же вышел уже из зума. Что за бред? Блин, как ты можешь